If you wait for the assignment, you're too late, right? You got to start thinking about it in advance, pre-selling that concept in advance, so that by the time the assignment hits, the assignment is written through the lens of the way you want it to work for your idea.
Whether you're going to market through dealers, distributors, or some other partner channel, the mediated sale is complex. We call it B2B to X.
But the leaders in the industry are the ones who are making it look simple. I'm John Goff.
And I'm Kyler Mason, and this is Why You Win, presented by Element 3.
Iain Lanivich is the award-winning executive creative leader at Ford Pro. He's the head of brand, creative, and content. And he's got an awesome story because he comes from a full career on the agency side of the business where he was telling stories and building brands, and entered Ford Pro several years ago just as that brand was launching. And so he talked to us about different experiences that he's had and opportunities that he's had to define the brand and build the brand and make it resonate with the retail side of the house, as well as creating some separation and a unique identity for the brand. He's got a great background in building these creative teams and a really unique perspective that we really enjoyed. So in this podcast, you will also hear what Ford Pro actually stands for, and it's not what you think. I hope you enjoy. Iain, we're so grateful to have you with us today. Thanks for joining us.
Great. Can't wait.
So we haven't had a lot of creative leaders on the podcast. We're looking forward to this because it's a different angle for us. Talk to us about the role that you sit in at Ford right now.
Yeah, I'm in charge of all brand creative for Ford Pro, right? So if it's got a Ford Pro logo on it, I'm an approver. That's advertising, that's branding, that's CRM, that's email, that's events, you name it. In this role, I've gotten a lot more event work than I had previously in my career. But luckily for me, I think I had a career that I started in digital when it was really just web, and then advertising hit, right? And then kind of learned branding, learned advertising, learned social media, did PR. So by the time I came in this role, it was like I was able to speak to all of it. You got to be an entrepreneurial creative director. If you grew up in a large ad agency, large agencies kind of pigeonhole their teams. It's just basically you have specialists in digital or CRM or websites or national advertising or whatever. And there's many people that I've interviewed throughout my career that basically come in, they've got 3 years on the job, and their book is just email design, right? And first, they landed their first gig at a big shop, just graduated college, got asked on day one, can you lay out these emails? And 3 years later, they're in the CRM team knocking out emails. For me, just the way my career worked, being able to work across a lot of different things, new business assignments or RFPs and stuff, they all take a different approach, a different angle. And when you come into the corporate side, I was maybe under the assumption when I came over here that I just felt clients had an understanding of how you build brands and how you build campaigns and how you organize all these types of things. And that's not always the case. If you've got somebody that got hired in that came from a shop that did everything entirely in-house, never worked in a complex corporate environment with large corporate agency structures, they don't know what they can ask an agency to do. They don't know these different roles. So I think for me, it was this like, as a creative director by trade, my job is to create consistency, maintain quality, maintain integrity of an idea, and try to permeate that idea across as many channels as I can possibly do, like give it as many legs as possible. So I think for me, it's like when I came over, I was thinking, oh, it's a great opportunity. When you work agency side, it a lot of times feels like it's moving so fast, but you're really only focused on your scope, and maybe you might pitch some concepts or stuff like that fall outside of it, like how this idea could work beyond what your assignment is. But there's no real expectation that those things are going to happen. And it's kind of up to your client if they're going to go get another department outside of theirs to fund that or to take ownership of it. So I thought one of the things coming in was going to be like, wow, I'll have access to all of that. How do you make a brand come to life across everything? Training, sales, everything you're not thinking about a lot of the times when you're working on an agency side or you're just focused on a social media scope or an advertising scope or things like that. But then you realize like how massive it is and how overwhelming it can be. And I think that was a pretty big learning curve when you have engineers that build things on vehicles reaching out to you directly because they see your title and they don't really know what you do, but they see you as an opportunity to basically get their story shared. And you're coming in not knowing if you should even be taking that meeting or not. So you're just taking all those meetings and you're hearing from all these people and you're like, what do I do with this information? My first 3 months, people set up so many one-on-ones with me. And I'm like, I don't even like really funny moment. I had all these one-on-ones and my day 2 in the corporate world was a completely packed calendar from like 9 to 5, no gaps. Day 2, heat of COVID, working where you're not leaving your seat at all. You're trying to find a moment to like run downstairs to go to the bathroom and come back before anybody even notices. Right. And all that's happening. And I'm just like bouncing meeting to meeting. And it was like, I remember I bounced into this one-on-one and I start talking to this guy and he's sitting there with a hoodie and we're just chatting. And I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, I don't even know who this person is. And then at some point in time, like early in the conversation, I'm like, so tell me about what you do. And he just kind of looked at me and laughed. He goes, I'm your CFO. And I just started laughing. And I'm like, look at me. I got blue hair and piercings, and you're sitting across from me as my CFO in a hoodie.
Yeah.
This
crazy.
is cool. But I didn't even I didn't even have the time right out of the gate to even look up like, who am I meeting with? So like there was just so many different people.
I mean, how awesome to come into a role and be so highly sought after. Did you have a predecessor or are you the first one in the role?
Well, when I started, Ford Pro was brand new, right? It was my first time working on fleet, but I grasped the concept of it very quickly. I came into this role thinking that I'm basically just leading creative, really ended up becoming a subject matter expert for Ford Pro. Right. I learned the products. I learned the relationships of the products. I learned how this thing works together with this thing in order to improve your uptime. Right. But internally within Ford, you have one group that's working on this product, one group that's working on this product. And it requires somebody to realize, wow, if we bring these two things together, we can, offer our customers a better solution. So in going through defining the brand, defining the way that we were going to start to storytell, but yeah, there was not much time to figure out the brand, figure out the strategy behind the brand, make it come to life through art and copy, put it through the lens of, why would journalists care in order to launch a media event, get our agencies up to speed and everybody else involved up to speed, launch it, and then turn around and do the same thing for a customer audience. Right. And in doing all that, it helped cross-train employees and everybody else involved and how we should talk about this and how these things work together. So I really developed strong relationships with our sales teams, with our dealer teams, with our software teams and everybody else involved. And it's been fun.
You're getting a full set of experiences in change management. It sounds like unexpectedly.
I think that's what makes it fun, though, right? It creates tension, it creates some anxiety.
Yeah.
But when I look back, even the assignment I'm working on right now, it's like pretty much every large assignment I've ever worked on that has high quality, has a creative lens on it, or some type of clever creative angle on it, is complex. It always has like these tension moments. Right. And you just got to stay focused on the end result, especially as a creative. Right. At the end of the day, the stuff you see, regardless of what it is, that's the stuff that you're producing. So all the planning that went into it, all the strategy that went into it, doesn't matter if that end thing doesn't come to life the way that it needs to, and it isn't perceived the way you want it. So yeah, it's all projects to me.
So when you're taking a household name in a retail environment and translating that brand into commercial vehicle, talk to us about the thing that was running through your head. How do you create distinction, separation? What are you worried about or thinking about in that brand moment?
Yeah, drinking from a fire hose, right? I grasped the concept of the story of Ford Pro, what we wanted it to be. And that's what we translated into the branding. But at the same time, I was learning fleet. I was learning commercial. I didn't know much about upfitting. I'm still learning today, but I feel like I accelerated that learning in that first year to 2 years. It's difficult because your customer, in most cases, your customer is buying your vehicles, whether or not they're buying your software, other services, or subscribing to them, or using your financing or stuff like that. It starts with your vehicles. And luckily for us, we have the largest market share in the commercial space, right? So you could pretty much look at any fleet out there, and most of them have a Ford vehicle in their lineup. And most are mixed fleets, right? And we know that. So our products are basically like built so that they can work regardless of, what brand you're driving. It's all about Ford Pro is there for businesses and there to help you with your fleets. And we understand that you might not have 100% Ford lineup. But to your customers, they interface with Ford most of the time, not Ford Pro. Right. Mm-hmm. So you're not going to have a Ford Pro badge on the vehicle, right? It's got a Ford badge. You're going to a Ford dealership. right? So we have to work a little bit harder to help them understand what Ford Pro is. And I think we're not flooding the airwaves in NFL football with Ford Pro advertising, right? A lot of this is happening through customer relationships with our sales teams, local advertising, very targeted advertising to small business customers, because that was one of the big reasons for Ford Pro is you had the OEMs that have sales reps that talk with the national accounts. But a lot of the products we offer could be very beneficial for a business that maybe has a 5-vehicle fleet and they're a plumber, right? The only people talking to them is the dealers. We love our dealer network, but they might not be talking about the range of Ford Pro solutions. Ford Pro is new, we have to educate them on that. So it was really like, how do we make sure that we help our customers understand that Ford Pro isn't like an add-on. It's not like just the software you can subscribe to. It stands for commercial and business expertise, right? It's like if you are starting a new business and you basically aren't exactly sure what type of configurations of vehicles you need in order to fund and finance to start your business, we will help you with that. If you don't know what is the best option, from an upfitting standpoint, we will help you with that. We'll help you understand how to basically have the most uptime when it comes to service. It's helping people understand that it's Ford for business. It's not just, even internally, it's when you look at the rest of our lineup, like an Explorer, it's not considered a, core commercial vehicle. But there's a lot of people in Ford that don't realize Ford Pro sells Explorers too. Right? Because it's like, if you're using it for business and it's the right option for you for whatever it is you're doing, then you're our customer and we still have to help guide you through whatever other aspects of managing your fleet.
Do you find that the carry on from the retail brand experience is more helpful, or is it sometimes confusing for some of your business customers?
Having experience in automotive, especially complexities of US automotive or North American automotive, when you get into how the dealers work, when you get into the different types of tier 2 advertising, tier 3 advertising, sales events, all these other types of things that are just kind of tried and true and have been around in automotive for quite some time. But if you're coming in having only worked in technology and all of a sudden you come into this space, it's a huge learning curve. I had worked off and on in automotive for other brands for 20 plus years. So I've interfaced with a lot of different aspects of auto and was able to kind of navigate some of that and help others navigate that. But I think from even a messaging standpoint, so much of it is emotion, right? It's like, I'm trying to make you fall in love with this thing. I'm trying to make you just basically realize the feeling of when you get behind the wheel or when you walk out of your house and you see what you have in your driveway. Right? So much of it is on that. Right. And in the commercial space, what I think is difficult for a lot of people to understand is the person that's making the decision to buy the vehicle may never drive it and probably won't ever drive it. Right. So it is a tool transaction, right? I am buying tools, for my business. Like that emotion, maybe when you get down to a small fleet, or small business, right? I grew up a Ford guy and now I'm starting a HVAC company and basically we're going to start with Ford vehicles. And then as you grow, maybe you might start hitting a point where you realize at this moment in time, the offer is better on something else and I need to go with that, right? So you start to mix your fleet. But when you get higher in size of vehicles across the brands, that emotion gets less and less and less. Right. So it has to be all about being straight. It's not being clever and cute to this audience, not understanding what they already know. Because it's like a lot of times different teams internally and externally, they get excited about something like upfitting. Oh, that's so exciting. You can customize your vehicle. And it's like, yeah, this customer already knows that. They already understand that. Right. I don't need to tell them that I can customize transit van. Right. So I think it's those types of things. The differences of how you present messaging to a commercial audience versus a retail audience is very different.
How do you make that energizing and fun if you're coming from a place where emotion sounds fun and glamorous and very creative? How do you find inspiration in the fact that the message you're talking about needs to be a little more direct? It needs to be more business minded. It needs to speak to the things that are, like you said, it's solving a specific problem and it's a tool.
Like, I mean, I'm a creative, right? Like, I want it to be interesting to me. I want to get excited about it, right? We had an event a few months ago where we brought some of our largest customers in and we kind of helped them understand everything that we were offering and what had evolved since we did this event several years ago. Typically at events, you might have keynote presentations, you might have breakout sessions, things like that. And breakout sessions, when I go to them most of the time, in pretty much any type of event, it's usually death by PowerPoint. And PowerPoint's got a purpose. It's the fluent language of corporate America. So you got to know it. You got to speak it fluently. But if you can figure out how to retool what you're trying to communicate through a more interesting way, that could be a way to deliver info. So like at our last event, we had 3 breakout sessions and we put them through the lens of like game shows. So it was basically like, how do we basically take the linear story that our subject matter experts are already ready to present, and they've done this without having to think about it and they know what it is, and without completely overhauling their world, how do I put it through the lens of a game show where it feels random, it feels different, it feels spontaneous, but it's still the same linear story that was in the script? Just to be honest, I remember people were like, nobody's going to want to pay attention to this. Like, we're doing all this extra work to figure out how to gamify a presentation. And when we did it in our post-event survey, that content rose to the top on the feedback, because it just was such a break in the dryness of what they experience every day in their jobs, that it created some laughter. It created some unexpected moments for them. And it was cool and it was fun.
Yeah. And as a brand guy, you're like, I got the impression, I got the attention, and they're not going to remember all the PowerPoint anyway. They may or may not remember all of the game show, but were they going to remember that they had a great experience with Ford Pro? Yes.
Yeah. Or that we're trying something different. We're trying to help them understand something in a different way. I mean, I think a lot of people in the commercial space have been in this industry for a really long time. They grew up in this industry. They know it really well. They have longstanding relationships with their customers. If you're a dealer, you've been working with the same customers for a long time. If you're one of our national account managers, you've been working with your customer for a really long time. So I hate to use the term of like can't teach an old dog new tricks type thing, but that's kind of the mentality. So I see it as one of my jobs is to make everybody think different on these approaches, or find that angle that can change it, because everyone's pretty fine with keeping things the way they are. And I think that's just something I used to say this on the agency side. Sometimes you might have an idea that you just know is a no-brainer. They should totally do this. Right. And you put it in front of your client and it's basically like, why isn't it going anywhere? Are they just not understanding it? Do I need to present it to them again? And it might be because they don't have full control to pull off that idea, right? They might need to involve other groups, other teams, other budgets. And I think the same thing happens internally, right? Like the system is built to do things the way it's always been done. So like as an agency creative, for example, when you're asked to think outside the box, yeah, when you get into the presentation and it shows the clients that basically you can think beyond the norm, but the odds of them buying one of those things is really, really low. Right. So I used to tell people, like, if you wait for the assignment, you're too late. Right. You got to start thinking about it in advance, pre-selling that concept in advance, so that by the time the assignment hits, the assignment is written through the lens of the way you want it to work for your idea. Right. Because otherwise, like in an agency, they know how to produce a TV spot. They know how to produce a website. They know how to produce banner ads and emails and all that stuff. It's like the whole system pumps that stuff out. But come in there with some crazy experiential kind of idea, or come in there with some app, or come in there with something different. And it's like all of a sudden your project managers, your account teams, your production teams, everybody's like, I don't really know how to move this forward. Your clients, and it requires somebody internally to really champion those ideas and push through those walls. And I try to be that person on the corporate side now.
And you're saying internally, you mean like either both agency side and?
Yeah, I would say on the corporate side, it's much more, right? Because you got a lot more corporate structure. You've got a lot more standardized things and processes and scorecards and measurable KPIs and all of that, and that are being reported back. So if you're presenting an idea that is maybe competing against something that they already know, if I do this, I'm going to get this. Is it really worth that risk? Because maybe my objectives this year account for me to deliver this. And if I do this thing, it'll help with that. But if I do this other thing, it's the unknown, right? So risk taking, I think corporate America just in general, for the most part, is risk averse. And I think Creativity is the opposite of that, right? So finding the balance of how to surface the right things, how to evaluate the creative that the various teams I work with are bringing to me, what makes sense to really bring forward or what read the room, right? If I bring this to anyone right now, are they going to be like, why are you spending time on this? We've got this thing going on. So I think you really just got to have an understanding of everything going on around you, what's the current priorities of the moment, and then always be looking for opportunities.
Do you have a story of an assignment that you like did the legwork to socialize, influence so that you had the buy-in before you actually like started in on it?
This is kind of maybe falls in line with that, but a little different. In 2019, before I started at Ford, one of my clients was Pure Michigan, travel and tourism brand. Was very well known for many years, really well known advertising, big award winning from a brand standpoint, beautiful imagery, voiceover, well written voiceovers. And it created this perception in people's minds that like Pure Michigan, it's waterfalls, it's trails, it's, all of that, experience Pure Michigan. But when you work on government business, it always goes up for review, even if everything's going amazing, right? Relationships could be awesome, work could be great, but it's like it has to go up for review after a certain period of time. And it was one of those years. And the strategy we were working with was like, how do you export the peer? Like, how do I take the peer and bottle it up and get it out to people to encourage more people to come into Michigan for travel? So maybe people that grew up in Michigan and moved away and you want them to come back, or how do you get people to extend their trips to turn a weekend trip into a week or turn things like that? And I was thinking about like the amount of people that go to sleep to sounds, right? Sounds of nature and stuff like that. I'm like, what if we basically just created a sleep album for Pure Michigan? And we basically recorded found sounds and actual sounds of water and actual sounds of nature and everything you could think of within Michigan, right? And put it out as a sleep album and pitched this concept. And it was like one of the 30 ideas we went into the pitch with. And we finally launched it over 3 years later. It was almost like no one really knew how to act on that right away. Where does it fall? I don't know what my clients' objectives or stuff like that were for the year. I knew that idea fell in line with what we were pitching, but it took a really long time before it actually aligned with where their heads were at. 2.5 years later, I get a call and it was, hey, we need a proposal put together for how you would execute that sleep album. And what we ended up doing, which was really interesting, was we aligned it. So from a earned media standpoint, it was the 100th anniversary of Michigan State Park. So we're like, okay, what if we collect sounds from different state parks across the entire state? So that becomes a way to tie the earned angle into it. And then we got stuck because if we put it on the streaming platforms, we're going to collect royalties. And the government entity couldn't collect royalties. So the idea was ready to die. Because basically it was like, so the angle around that was to have real artists collect royalties. So what we did was we worked with a production house, the music house, awesome team, Assemble Sound, they're amazing. They started chatting through it and basically we realized there was a group of Michigan artists that were all in different categories like folk music, hip hop, electronic, stuff like that, but they all dabbled in ambient. And there was like a subtle growth of ambient music. And so we did exactly that. We sent some sound engineers throughout the state. They hit 10 different state parks. They came back with who knows how many sounds. We then cataloged those sounds. We basically briefed the 10 different musicians and we mixed basically a sunrise to sunset journey from start to finish listening session of the state of Michigan. And it was, we launched on all the streaming platforms in 2019. It actually ranked, I think it was number 9 on Billboard on the New Age chart. It was crazy. We're like, oh my God, we just ranked on Billboard on the New Age chart for Pure Sounds of Michigan. It's really cool. It was just an example of like, we had a great idea. The time wasn't right. Right. But it stayed a topic. It would get brought up every once in a while and stuff. And it was in the client's minds. And then eventually when the time was right, the client probably must have set aside some budget and stuff like that and said, let's try this Pure Sounds of Michigan idea. And it worked.
That's awesome. Love that.
Hope springs eternal for marketing teams after that story. They're just like, yes, it's not dead yet. It's not dead yet. And the thing that I have a question about, especially as you're coming from this agency environment and retail auto, working with these dealers and upfitters, really like this whole complex ecosystem that exists in commercial vehicles. When you are watching now your peers come into this environment or people who haven't worked in that before, what's the keyword that you give them? What's the big tip that they need to understand the complexity they're walking into?
You've got to learn it. Like you've got to talk with the people that are doing it every day. When you first walk into a brand and you don't know much about that brand and you haven't worked with that brand and you maybe you know how to pitch that brand, who knows, right? You download their style guide, you get your hands on it, you stay to it, right? You follow the rules. But once you know the rules, then you can start to figure out where do you bend the rules? How far do you push them? You know, stuff like that, right? Like I'm sure the person that created the style guide has not applied that style guide to every type of creative across the brand, right? Their deliverable was a style guide, right? But to most people that work on the brand, it is like that is fact. That is, it's just assumed that all of that has happened. Like upfitting, I had worked on truck advertising and stuff like that on the retail side, but I hadn't even really heard the term upfit, or if I did, it just went over my head because I didn't know what it was. Like we have a product called the Vehicle Integration System 2.0. When it first started getting talked about internally, it was the only thing that I think people could really grasp of what that thing was, is it lets you put buttons on the touch screen in the vehicles that could do upfit controls, right? So I could basically tab, instead of me having to use one of the like 5 switches or 6 switches that are in the overhead to turn on a light in the back, or instead of me having to create a set of controls on the upfit and get out of my vehicle and walk around to turn those on, I can access the touchscreen or the sync screens, the Ford sync screens, to basically add new controls there, right? So now it's, for example, like if you have a police car and you need to turn on your sirens and turn on your lights, you're not going to start dabbling with the sync screen to do that, right? You're probably going to want to flip a switch, right? But if you're running into a situation where you have 10 different controls and there's only 5 things that you could basically immediately hit, right? You got to prioritize, what do I really need to like do right away versus what are things I can put in there? Well, this opens that door for you. Everybody just was like, oh, you could put stuff on the sync screen. And it really took until I was shooting a video, and it wasn't until I was literally on set and we were talking about the Vehicle Integration System 2.0, where it really hit me what like this was capable of. It's a way to basically program custom logic directly, so the vehicle can talk to the upfit and the upfit can talk to the vehicle and they know what they're doing. So for example, if I'm driving my salt spreader and I pull up to a red light and I stop and I forgot to flip the switch because the salt is still spreading and there's a mound of salt now there, and basically, oh, I flipped it and I just start driving again and stuff. Oh, I'm driving fast, so now it's like not a lot of salt is spraying, right? Now I'm driving slow, too much salt is spraying. Well, with our Vehicle Integration System 2.0, you can actually program those two things to talk together, right? So it's like the upfit, the salt spreader, knows that the vehicle is driving fast, so it says spray more salt. It knows it's idle, stop spraying salt, right? And it was just like, wow. Once that like unlocked in my brain, it was kind of like, look at any industry, look at any upfits, look at any viral video of a person trying to drive a bucket truck, not realizing the bucket is still up and pulling power lines down, right? It's like, that integration system basically can program the logic where the upfit is telling the vehicle that the upfit is still in use. So don't allow it to move out of park. And those are things that obviously upfitters deal with, right? And they have their own solutions of how they splice into the wiring harnesses and they do customization and stuff like that. And this just became a way to make it easier for the upfitters, but we have to educate the upfitters, right? And we have to educate the customers to understand the potential of what they can do so they can ask for those types of customizations. Things like that where, now when I think about upfitting, or now when I think about that product we offer, it's like I have a whole different way that I could take it, or how I can educate a customer, or how I can utilize that or create new scenarios of it. Somebody like an agency creative team that's just coming in for the first time and getting asked to put together something for the vehicle integration system, it's like they're going to have no concept of that. They're going to write about sync screens.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you talked about the emotion that exists in retail, but what you just talked about, there's tons of it there. I mean, peace of mind, pain, like you could fight against certain problems, just like getting the job done better, faster, easier. There's a lot there.
Back to the branding standpoint, for Ford Pro, right off the bat, when people see the word pro, Lysol Pro, Lowe's for pros, it's professional, right? And our branding is all about, we power the growth and productivity of every business today and tomorrow. So it was like, how do we get people to realize the word pro stands for productivity and not professional? Now, obviously, people are going to always think professional and stuff like that. But everything we do from a branding standpoint, for the most part, is to try to help customers understand how they can be more productive, more efficient, save time, and hopefully lower their spend.
I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either.
I have a question for you. If you were to give coaching to an exec team in the, let's say in the commercial space, like how to set up a really good culture or platform for creative to succeed and like have the space it needs to do good work, what kind of coaching would you give?
I definitely come from the mindset that the best work is when people are having fun doing it, when you're excited and rallying around an idea, when you can see the potential of where an idea can go and you can help others visualize that as well. When you basically reach key milestones and there's like celebratory moments. I don't necessarily mean like you have to have a party for it, but basically it's like you got to be excited in the office or give some kudos. But my understanding of the way corporate works is it's like the structure isn't that, right? There's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pressure around hitting things like earnings numbers. What did we commit to the investors, right? And then that trickles down to what are the priorities or the objectives from a sales or a marketing standpoint. And then that trickles down to the teams that are working on those things. To be efficient, it was in Spaceballs, take only what you need to survive, right? That's the mentality, right? It's, do you really need that? And I think there's a lot of creative stuff that is kind of considered more nice to have. Right? You need to figure out how to separate the pressure from the teams that are doing the work. And you need to create flexibility so that there's exploration baked into it. Sometimes it's a fire drill. Things changed. Maybe something changed out in the world. Maybe something changed in culture, maybe whatever. And you've got to adapt to it and figure it out quickly. But you can do that in a way without making it feel intense or creating anxiety. When I worked on the agency side, my last job, for example, I had started that creative team from scratch for the most part. And we built it up over the years I was there, from just doing some basic work to doing some pretty high profile work for a variety of brands. And I always tried to, since I was a leader in the role, protect the team from a lot of the politics that happen in the agencies or on the client side or things like that, right? And I feel like on the agency side, it was more like a team sport, right? It's like your account managers know their role. They're managing that client relationship and they have ownership over the entire program, right? Your strategists play their role. Your creatives play their role. Your production teams play their role. You might not always align on everything together, but in order for a project to go to market, it has to go through all those things. Right. And I think on the corporate side, it's more like an individual sport. You have individual teams with individual objectives. And when you need to work with other teams, it doesn't always allow for that flexibility or everybody to get aligned on things. Right. Because if, let's say, this idea doesn't align with that team's objective, but I need that team in order for this to succeed, like it could just be a dead end. Right. So there's got to be a way to create a little bit more synergy so that teams can be more flexible and can step outside of the day-to-day in order to basically make something new or interesting.
Yeah, you were talking about sitting around thinking about Pure Michigan and wouldn't it be cool if we made this album? You can't really do that when your head's down in production, right? So how do you make space for that in a corporate team or an agency team? Is, I think, to your point, the role of the leader, making sure that there's room for creative exploration.
Coming over to this job, it's really helped me understand the mindset of the client, right? I'd been doing this a long time. I was very front and center of presenting to clients when I was 23 years old, all the way up to I'm 48 now. And I know how to talk to different levels of clients and what's on their minds and things like that. But I think what a lot of agencies don't realize from the client side is we're in meetings all day, right? You're in back to back to back to back to back. And I'm not saying agency teams aren't, but from the time that we had our first meeting to talking about an assignment to the time that you come back with something, we've already had 1,000 conversations about that topic. And so the odds of you walking in the room being on the same page as we are is pretty low, it's difficult. Like you got to stay more connected. I would say from an agency team standpoint, it's don't go into the vortex, because it might feel on the agency, man, we're busting our ass and we're working through a whole bunch of stuff and we're creating stuff. But that client over there doesn't know what's in your guys' head. And they're having to answer to their leadership about what's going on with whatever projects. And they're going to be telling them a story. And then if that story doesn't align with what you come back in, but I've already sold that to my leadership, I need you to change now to adapt to what I just told, whether or not it makes sense or not to your idea. I used to always say I pre-sold a lot. I always pre-sell. We did something really cool for another event we did. We wanted to show how Super Duty was, just built for tough. Right. Super Duty, best max towing, of any truck out there with the right configuration. And we created a kind of a photo op towing experience where we literally fabricated a huge barbell. So a 40,000 pound barbell, right? So the trailer was 40,000 pounds. We had this fabricated barbell sitting on the back. So it's like, if you got anywhere within the vicinity, you're like, what is that? I want to drive that. Is that, you're just seeing this barbell moving around. But after you drove it, you can go hop on the trailer and put your hands up like you're lifting it and take a photo op with Super Duty, right? And stuff. And it was like, so the second that idea was it wasn't sold yet. We hadn't even figured out how to fund it yet, and stuff like that. I was already, running around the office and being like, hey, the barbell, getting people excited about the barbell. And then I showed up the day before the event. I'm like, I hope this barbell is actually pretty good. Because I hadn't seen the barbell yet. So it was a hit at the event, was the barbell, right? So it's things like that, like keeping people connected. I could have just sat there and waited for the moment for the official and formal presentation when we got 20 people in the room and flashed the barbell. And all it takes is one comment and all of a sudden that thing's dead.
Everyone shits their pants.
Right. So getting everybody excited. So by the time that barbell was actually shared in a formal presentation and had comps with it and stuff like that, everybody was already bought into the idea.
Yeah. That's such good advice.
So for the people who are listening to this, Iain, and this is incredible, let's shift to like smaller than Ford. I think the temptation is probably, hey, like it would be great if I had a head of brand for my entire organization and he had time to like think of all these cool ideas and I had this budget to build this stuff. How do you scale it to the other kinds of organizations that you're working with directly? Think about upfitters or dealers. I don't believe that brand is only for the biggest 50 organizations in the world or the biggest 500. I think it's for everybody, but I know that the fear is I don't have time, energy, money to go do that kind of cool thing. So I'm just going to tell myself that B2B is boring and that's okay. And it's not important that I have brand because I have relationships. Help me walk into that room.
I've seen a lot of ideas over the years. I've sold myself on ideas that maybe when I look back now, I'm like, what was I thinking? I mean, at the end of the day, it's just got to be cool. Right. I think it's got to be just, is that something I want to associate with? Right. And the more that you can relate to your audience or your buyer, right? I grew up blue collar. I worked in factory when I was 18 and I related to the audience that basically drives our trucks and our vans, and my friends are electricians and stuff like that. I remember I worked on a luxury brand years ago and I figured it out and I did great work and I was happy with the work. I just don't associate with that type of buyer and the mindset and the aspirational audience and the connection into fashion or whatever it is that, the audience persona comes out as. I never felt like I was bringing myself to the work, but I never really felt like I connected with it. So when I think you're maybe a smaller business, the brand probably takes on the persona of the owner because that's the person that's out there talking and shopping and meeting with customers. And maybe you're growing, but I think you got to find your truth. What ultimately led you to starting to be successful? What led you to starting this business in the first place? What was that passion that you saw that you realized you could do that too, or you could do that better, or you could bring something to the market that's a little different than the other players out there, and really kind of hone in on that. And I think in some ways it's easier when you're smaller because you could basically just focus on that one aspect. I think when you're a corporation the size of a Ford, right? And you sell to so many different audiences for so many different reasons. it's really difficult to find that connective tissue that can really work across everything that you feel comfortable with and committing to and investing in and running with it for a long period of time. I mean, we launched the Ford Pro brand after a lot of us had only been here for a short while. I think we did a good job of like figuring out how to at least help people understand what it was if they were interfacing with us or if they were seeing our stuff. But I think even over the last 4 years I've been here and I've watched the evolution of it, there's a lot of new learnings. When we first came out of the gate, it was one-stop shop, one-stop shop. And we've got software, charging, service, financing, and vehicles. And it was like, that's great if I know how to piece those things together. Right. It's like, I can go into the grocery store, I can see what's in the aisles, but it's like, if I don't know the recipe, then basically I'm just going to buy the things I always buy. And it was like presenting the one-stop shop message. It was good to create awareness around basically what are our offerings if you know what you're looking for. But I think as we've been evolving, it's starting to switch to more solution-based messaging. So we can help people understand how they can simplify aspects of their business, how they can basically optimize their upfitting, how they can go about transitioning to electric, because there's a lot of complexities to that, especially in the commercial and business space. You know, how you can basically look at topics like safety and security through a different lens, or how do I mix and match different products or different services in order to build and tailor the right solution for a customer, right? Those are things that I would have never known on day one. For no creative agency, regardless of, they can have the best creative and strategy teams in the world, until you really get in and start really working in it and really understanding it and meeting and hearing from customers and hearing from dealers and hearing from your internal teams who have been doing this for a long time, can you really start to put a new perspective on it.
We have watched organizations go through literally that same mechanism of the business has assembled all of these different functions, and where we want to go to market and use all of them and make money on all of them. That's our business model. And the message didn't resonate for exactly the reason that you're describing. And it wasn't until they sort of get their head around like, oh, there's segmentation in our customers and not everybody needs everything in the same way all at once. It needs to be tailored. Do they kind of come around to that? Oh yeah, that is why creative marketing and messaging and targeted communications is essential to making this business idea work.
I agree 100%. I mean, it gets more complicated, right? As digitals, I came into the business, like when I first started working, my first agency job was in 2000. I was in the digital department, right? It was like, at that time, people were wondering, is this like a fad, right? Like, is this department going to be here 2 years from now kind of thing? And I remember when everybody started switching from dial-up modems to broadband, because that was right when all of a sudden digital advertising really hit. It went from, I can do a 20K file size banner to all of a sudden I can run video and ads, right? But I wasn't trained in advertising. I was doing web stuff and I wanted to be a computer programmer, right? So I didn't really understand consistency of messaging and, you know, the role of branding. It was like, that was stuff I had to learn. And so I've watched it evolve. I watched social evolve. I watched all these things evolve through the lens of working in the trade. But it's so complicated now, right? Like my LinkedIn now is basically spam, right? It's like, I mean, the amount of reps that are just hitting me on the daily, I miss the people I actually want to talk with, right? Because it's almost like just noise to me. And I'm sure some of them have some really cool solutions, right? And there's a programmatic this, or how I can custom tailor, or how I can take a piece of content and flip it and, you know, and make it work for this persona and this persona. Great. You got to have the time to evaluate all those things. You got to have the budgets to invest in all those things. The solutions are out there. It just requires somebody who's got the time, the energy, the motivation, and the passion to basically kind of figure out and pull it off. And then you're always going to have the technology side of it versus the creative side of it, right? And how those two things blend together.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. You got to find a champion. And if you don't have one and you can't find one, it might mean something about your product or your messaging or something is in there. Iain, we're here kind of near our time. What haven't we talked about that you want to make sure we hit for either you or Ford Pro?
I'm just excited of 4 years into Ford Pro. It takes a long time for these messages to start to get received. I'm excited for where we're going. I know what kind of products we have coming. We were infants 4 years ago, and now we're maturing and we're realizing like how to really kind of make everything gel together. So yeah, stay on the lookout and hopefully I run into you guys along the way.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we'd love to see that.
Hopefully we see you at some shows or something. We also work with a couple dealers that I'm sure are working with you too. So we're in your orbit a little bit.
Cool. Yeah, it's awesome.
Good. Yeah.
Ian, this
Thanks
has
a
been
ton,
great.
man.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, guys.
Why You Win is presented by Element 3, a marketing firm focused on modernizing go-to-market strategies for manufacturers that sell through complex distribution channels. We help leaders solve problems across demand generation, sales channel support, and brand development.
If you'd like more from myself or John, connect with us on LinkedIn. And for more from Element 3, visit element3.com. That's elementthree.com.